It has been a while since we've looked at the little diddly doodad calves. And this is what I call the front end of the cattle herd, right? The little 200 to 300 pounders. And this is them right now. The bigger ones are probably closer to getting up there towards a 350. But the small ones are, they're probably about a 2.25, 250, something like that. They've been here for about a week, and they've probably put on about 25 pounds in the week. They've done real well. These calves did real well. I started metaphylaxis on them again, and that metaphylaxis had a very positive results. And I've spoken about antibiotics in the past and the use of antibiotics, and there is a direct correlation between BRD, the incidence of BRD, and the not using antibiotics. Okay. And I know that this is, but it's, it is what it is. Like, even a human baby, when a human baby is born, they give that baby all sorts of shots at the hospital, okay? And it's the same thing with these little calves. I bring them home at about 200, 250, and these little calves, they don't have very much on them, okay? They don't got a whole lot. They don't got a whole lot. If they get sick, they get pretty miserable pretty fast, and it's a very sad thing to see. And so I do use a metaphylaxis treatment on these cattle, and there is a direct correlation between these animals, the use of antibiotics. If I don't use antibiotics, I end up with more BRD, okay? And there is a direct correlation to that. And these animals, the thing about these animals is that if they get BRD, it's contagious. You get one animal that has BRD, and the next thing you know, you got 3 animals that have BRD. And if you got 3 little 250-pound calves with BRD, chances are they're not going to make it, okay? Chances are they're not going to make it, and if you got them commingled with the 400 or 500-pound calves, and the 400 or 500-pound calves, 1 or 2 of them might get it, and it just turns into a mess, okay? And so I do give all of the animals a shot of antibiotics when they first get here. And when they start doing okay, when they show signs of doing well, that is when I give them their vaccinations. All right. And so this is the front end of the cattle herd. And yesterday I forgot to mention the whole thing. Like, when I put money into my business, right? Like when I put money into my business, I put money into the front end of the cattle herd, right? I don't go and buy myself a bunch of 600, 700, 800-pound calves, right? I don't go and buy a bunch of 600, 700, 800-pound yearlings. I buy these animals at 200, 300, sometimes even up to 400 pounds, but usually I don't go over 500 unless I see unless I see like a very good deal, okay? Like, if I see a very good deal on a 600-pound animal, then I'll buy the animal, okay? And but these animals, this is the front end of the cattle herd. And the whole thing about the front end of the cattle herd, that's where I dump all my money. And so, and for me to take these animals from this size up to a point where they go to market, that takes time, okay? That takes about 7 months, maybe 8 months. And during that 8-month period, if I may not have a check in my hand, but I am still making money, right? I am still making money. I may not have a check in my hand, but I have the money, right? I just haven't paid myself the money yet, because if I were to pay myself the money, I would have to liquidate the calves. And why would I do that, right? Why would I go and sell my smallest animals, right? These are the last animals that I would ever sell, and realistically, I wouldn't sell them to begin with. Why would I sell them? I've always said that if you're in a situation where you need money, like if you are legitimately in a situation where you need money, you're like, oh my God, I don't have money and I need money, I desperately need money, that is a sign that you perpetually kick yourself in the dick. I guarantee it. There is, every once in a while, like if I need money, first of all, I wouldn't sell these animals. I would sell my biggest animals. I would sell the animals on the back end of the cattle herd, right? I wouldn't sell these animals. All right, if I was ever in a situation where I reasonably believed that I had to sell the animals that are this size, that would be a very bad situation that I was in. And I'm not going to ever put myself in that situation, knock on wood, all right? The whole idea of perpetually kicking yourself in the dick, I would have to have kicked myself in the dick very, perpetually to end up in a situation where I would decide, oh my God, I need to sell my 200 or 300 pound calves. All right, you know, realistically, that's not in the cards for me. Okay, and so one thing that I was but this is the front end of the cattle herd. This is the little 200-300 pounders, and so today I was actually thinking about this, and next year I'm gonna put in effort into buying myself a lot of. I'm gonna look into, not a lot, but I am going to look into buying myself real estate, a couple $1 million at least. All right, and the whole thing about land, I was actually thinking about this today. But the whole thing about land is that if I buy a piece of land and I can produce enough cash flow on that land to pay for the debt service, then the land is effectively free, right? I'm not concerned about the cost of the land. If I buy a piece of land, right? Here's the thing. If I buy a piece of land and I put cattle on that land, and let's say that I buy a piece of land for $1 million, okay? Let's say I buy a piece of land for $1 million and I owe the bank let's say I owe the bank $7,500 a month. And I bought myself 100 acres for $1 million, right? So I owe the bank $7,500 a month, and I have myself 100 acres. If I produce more than $7,500 a month on that 100 acres, then I can pay the bank back with the money that I make on the field, right? Like, you know, if I have a 100-acre field and that 100-acre field is making me, you know, more than $7,500, I can pay the bank back with the $7,500 that I made from farming the field, right? So the land is effectively free. And so I was thinking about this, and I will put in time to buy real estate, a substantial amount, you know, as much real estate as I can next year. I'll be looking into just buying up land. And here's the thing. Land is a very good, you know, and I've spoken about the land, you know, real estate, and I've spoken about real estate. Banks love lending for land and real estate. All right, it's not just land. All right, it's buildings, apartment complexes, single family homes, practically anything. All right, banks love lending for real estate. You can get some of the best loans like possible to man. You can legitimately buy a house on a 30-to-1 leverage, which I would not suggest. I've already said that if you're in this situation, you're going to lose money forever. I can almost guarantee it. All right, you should not right now, you know, and it's not ever been, you know, and I've even spoken about this, like even the people who have homes right now, if you actually pencil out the numbers, they've lost money on their homes. The longer that they hold on to that house for, they're going to lose money, more money, the longer it goes on for. Okay, homes are not a realistic way to make money. They're not. All right, and I will go into, you know, with the whole idea of, you know, what I, you know, see as a realistic way of making money. All right, and you got to understand, when I say this stuff, I'm not being a malicious person. I'm not being a horrible person. I'm not being some doofus. Okay, I am just being straight up honest as I can with you, and I'm being as sincere as I can about all of this, as sincere as possible. And God be my witness. I'm not being a malicious individual when I you know, discuss these ideas. But banks, technically, you can leverage your money about 30-to-1. All right, banks, if you give them 3.5% down, technically the bank may be willing to lend you the other 96.5%, and they will give you this loan on a 30-year term. They will give you 30 years to pay off this loan, and it'll probably be about 6-7% interest on a 30-year loan. At 30-to-1 leverage, okay? And I'm not suggesting that you do this. You will also have to pay PMI. All right, this is not a good idea. Homes are not a good idea. From the very beginning, homes have not, you know, buying a home has not been a good idea. Homes are not a realistic way to make money. They're not. Homes lose money over the long term. If you pencil out the numbers, homes lose money. All right, homes lose money. There are homes are not. I would not even consider a house a good investment. It's borderline about as good as a car. It's a little bit better than a car. Okay, that's how I see it. There are many actually good investments, all right? And I'll go into the whole idea of what I see as a good investment. I talk about this all the time. I discuss my idea all the time. What do I see as a good investment, right? An equitable asset that is good, right? You can't be YOLOing it, all right? And I'll go into all of this and produces a return, right? I'll go into all of this again here in a little bit. But banks love lending against real estate. Banks love lending for real estate. And if I put money into real estate and I pay down the principal, I can actually take the land and hold the land for collateral and then borrow my principal back. So even, let's say that I buy $1 million worth of land and I put $200,000 as a down payment for, a lot of these banks for land, if you give them a 20% down payment, if you give them 20% cash down, they'll just give you the rest of the money. That's effectively, I've heard this from multiple bankers. If you just put 20% down, we'll give you the rest of it. And so let's say that I go and I put 20% down. Let's say I'm buying a $1 million piece of land and I give the bank 200 grand. And also one of the good things about doing a business with the banks when it comes to land, one of the good things about doing business with the banks is that the bank will tell you what the land is worth. They will go out there and they will appraise the land for you. So they will give you a professional appraisal. And this is also, I've spoken about this in the past, like when you're buying land, don't even worry about what it costs because the bank will tell you what it costs as long as you're like within a reasonable margin, okay? You don't want to be looking at some worthless piece of land and for some astronomical price, right? It can't be something like that. But if it's like 100 acres and it's like within half an hour from Dallas and it's selling for $10,000 an acre, then you're effectively that's about the market, okay? That's not an absurd price. About a half an hour away from Dallas, $10,000 an acre, that's not some unheard of absurd price, okay? That's not like that's not some that's reasonable. And so something like that, you just put it under contract to take it to the bank, and then the bank will tell you what the land is worth. It's called getting the property appraised. Or if you have some appraiser, that you could pay as a third-party appraiser, and you can get them to do it for you, before you put in your offer. But get an appraisal, okay, a professional appraisal. And let's say that I go to the bank and I have $200,000 that I've, whatever, right? And I put that $200,000 cash as a down payment for the land, and the bank says, okay, thank you, and then they give me the other 80%. I can go back to the bank and tell the bank, hey, give me a loan against my land. And granted that my balance sheet looks, granted that I'm not like going underwater, granted that I'm not like failing miserably, right? I mean, realistically, my balance sheet is doing very well. And I'll actually put this all into perspective for you here in a little bit. My net worth may actually go over $50 million by next year. And I'll go over all of this. I'll go over all of this here, and I'll give you a reasonable way to look at it. So I can actually go back to the bank and I can tell them, hey, bank, I have this piece of land, give me a loan. And granted that my balance sheet is looking, my credit score is good, whatever. My balance sheet, it doesn't even have to be credit, okay? Granted that my balance sheet looks good, right? Oh, well, Mr. Chung is producing, he is producing, about $40,000 a month. He is a net positive about $40,000 a month, right? Well, that's good. And, but I mean, that's effectively the situation that I would be in. Like if I went to the bank and let's say I put $200,000 down for a piece of land, and the bank lent me the other 80%. And I went to the bank, and I realistically I was making whatever $70,000 a month. And I went to the bank and I said, hey, banker, I have this piece of land that I just bought. Would you hold this land for as a piece of collateral and lend me money against this piece of land? And they took a look at what I was doing. They're like, well, Mr. Chung is making about $70,000 a month, and he does have land, right? And this could be even with this piece of land. I could even do this with this piece of land. All right. I could even do this with this piece of land. It's any piece of land. Banks love lending for real estate, against real estate, for real estate. Banks absolutely love it because real estate, it's not going anywhere. It's not some fashionable business, right? I talk about fashionable businesses. It's not like some fleeting thing. Land will be land forever, right? And chances are the value of land will go up over a long period of time if you hold on to it long enough, and you buy it at its appraisal value. You don't severely overpay for it. If you hold on to it for a long enough period of time, chances are the value of the land will go upwards. Okay, I've talked about the big problem with the monetary system today is that technically money is technically today, it is an infinite resource. It's a piece of paper, it's a number on a screen, right? It's just a number in an account. Money, that's one of the big problems with money right now, is that it is technically an unlimited resource. All right, and that's one of the biggest problems, and therefore, there will probably be inflation. The central bank has started to lower the rate. There's a very realistic possibility that, even if they take the rate to 0% over the long term, even if they take the rate to 0% over the long term, that may not save the economy. There may legitimately have to be trillions of dollars of deficit spending. I've talked about all of this, right? I've discussed all these ideas, right? One of the biggest problems with money right now is that it is an infinite resource. It's a piece of paper. It's a number on a screen. All right. That's one of the biggest problems that we are having with the current financial situation. And, there will probably be inflation over the long term. Okay. There probably will be. And if there is some kind of a financial problem, taking the rate to 0 might not even work. There may have to be trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars of deficit spending, and that will make the inflation worse. All right. Rates might even end up going negative. All right. There's a possibility that even if the central bank does not lower the rate to negative, if there is some kind of a major economic problem and the asset market collapses, the asset market starts to tank. I'm not going to say collapse. If the asset market starts to go downhill very rapidly, the rate might go negative on its own, even if the central bank does not set it to a negative number. The rate might go negative on its own. But the big possibility is if the rate starts to go negative and it's being led by the asset prices going downwards, the Fed will front run the rate. All right, and there will probably be large amounts of deficit spending if something like that were to happen. And that will make the inflation problem even worse. But if asset prices go down and the rates go to borderline negative, I don't care. I will legitimately just go out and borrow trillions of dollars. Do you understand? If something like that happens, I don't care. All right, the beef market will still be the beef market. I could still run my cattle, and I don't care. All right, I don't care. I will go to the bank and I will borrow money hand over fist, and I will tell you that I'm borrowing money hand over fist. All right, I will legitimately go to the bank and take a loan for everything that I can. If rates go under 1%, if the bond yield goes negative, all right, then I will legitimately go to the bank and take a loan for everything that I can. All right, and I will just start buying up assets. Okay, and if I have a piece of land, I can always borrow against the piece of land and pull the money back out. So, it would be in my best interest. And that's also why I want to add land to my investment portfolio, is because banks love land. Banks love real estate. If I have real estate on my portfolio, banks will absolutely love that. And at the end of the day, the principal sum, I can always pull that money back out. I could just hold the land for collateral and pull the money back out. I could probably borrow the money at 9 or 10% interest, and I could probably borrow 80% of the principal amount. Okay, and you always have to remember that the money that I make on top of the money is always my money. So if I buy a piece of land for $1 million, and next year the land is now worth $1,030,000, then I can also borrow against the 80% of the $30,000 that the land appreciated by too. So I could, realistically borrow like $180,000 on a $200,000 down payment, and I would still have whatever, the equity margin and et cetera, et cetera. So I can borrow against the principal, and I can pull the money back out of the land, and then I can invest the money into the cattle, right? If that's what I so chose to do so. So I will be borrowing. I will be buying up land. I will be buying up a lot of land. There's no reason for me not to, and it would make my investment portfolio better. It would give me more opportunities for investment. And at the end of the day, it doesn't matter to me, because if I legitimately need the money, I can just pull the money back out by holding the land for collateral and borrowing against the principal. Okay, it doesn't matter to me. And so here's the thing. Let's say, and I've always said that, in terms of a good asset, I guess I'll tie this on to this first. The idea of a good asset, what do I see as a good asset, right? It can't be something like you're YOLOing Bitcoin. It can't be something like you're bombing your account on daily futures, okay, or on daily option contracts, okay? You can't be trading weekly option contracts and calling that investing, okay? That's not investing, all right? You can't be YOLOing things. You have to think about things for the long term, all right? I always say that the cattle business is not a fashionable business. It's not going anywhere, okay? And that's the thing, land is not a fashionable asset. The land is not going anywhere, okay? And so here, think about this. And I've always said that the whole thing about holding an equitable asset is that you hold the equitable asset, and if the asset produces you a return, not only are you making the return, but you are also holding on to the asset, right? So let's say that we got a wealthy individual, and this person has an asset they have $100 million worth of equity in this asset, and this asset is producing a 10% return. So let's say we have an individual, I'm not even gonna say wealthy. Let's just say we have an individual, and this person, and $100 million is wealthy. But after a certain point, the money doesn't do anything, okay? Unless you're legitimately like looking to send rocket ships to Mars, chances are you're not going to even be able to do anything with the money. The only time money does anything is if you actually do something with it. And if you don't do anything with it, it just turns into a number on a screen, okay? Money doesn't do anything. After a certain point, it's not going to be like you're gonna go and buy yourself a $2 billion house, okay? And it's not like money doesn't do anything after a certain point. If you're legitimately like looking to send rocket ships to Mars, then sure, then you could use a lot of money. But if you're not utilizing capital, it turns into it just doesn't do anything. I guarantee it, Warren Buffett is not sitting there right now looking at his bank account wishing that he had $10 billion more dollars, because if he had $10 billion more dollars, then he could go and live his dream. I guarantee it, okay? Money only does something if you actually do something with it, and if you don't do anything with it, it just turns into a piece of paper or a number on a screen, okay? But the big problem is that you can't just give everybody money, because if you gave everybody money would not be worth anything, okay? And that's the whole idea of capitalism, giving everybody an equal opportunity at the pie. You do not give everybody the pie, all right? And so let's say you got an individual and they have a $100 million asset, and this $100 million asset is producing them a 10% return a year. So they're making $10 million off of this $100 million asset. And so this individual decides, you know what, I want to go and buy myself a $50 million private jet. Let's say that this individual decides, I want to go and buy myself a $50 million or whatever, a $25 million private jet, whatever it may, $50 million private jet. Let's say 50 million. Okay, let's say 50 million. And so they go to the bank and they say, hey, banker, I would like a loan for $50 million. You can hold my $100 million equity stake in this asset as collateral. And I need $50 million so I can go and buy my jet. And so the bank takes a look at this man and says, well, you have $100 million, so we'll give you the loan for $50 million, and we will give it to you at 8% interest. And so the man with the $100 million asset is now sitting there going, okay, well, I have this $100 million asset. It's producing me 10% a year. Maybe it's a giant rental building, apartment building. It's a stable asset. And the bank says, okay, we will just give you the 50 million, and we will just to make it because the principal, even if it was a 30-year loan, the principal would be whatever 3%, right? So it's whatever, right? So let's just say that the bank gives the man the loan for 8%, and just says just pay 8% a year, and you can have the loan. 8% of 50 million. So the man now has the $50 million jet, and he is paying 8% a year for this jet, right? And he held his $100 million asset as collateral, and this $100 million asset is producing 10%, $10 million a year. So this person, the jet would not cost this person anything, because they would be paying $4 million a year, right, for that jet. If they paid $4 million a year, they would get to have the jet. They are paying the bank the interest. So if they paid $4 million a year, they would get to have the jet. The jet was purchased by holding a asset for collateral, a $100 million asset that produces $10 million a year as collateral. So the asset, the return on the asset is paying for the jet. All right. And but my net worth may not go over 50 million. It might, I don't know. And here's the thing. I do not see myself having much difficulty at all going to $2 million a year. I don't see myself having any difficulty at all going to $2 million a year. I don't see it as a difficult thing. I will probably be able to do it. And here's the thing. I actually logically deduced. And here's the whole shebang. I promised myself that I will at least try. I will legitimately try my best to invest all of the money. I will legitimately split my chops open in an effort to invest all of the money. And I also promised, I made a promise with God that I would do the morally right thing. All right. I'm not going to go and start doing drugs. I'm not going to go into, YOLO the money. All right. I'm not going to go and do morally irresponsible things. I made that promise with God, and I made a promise with myself that I will do my absolute best to invest all of the money that I make. I'm not going to sit here and tell myself that I can't do it. I am going to do my best to invest all of the money. And here's the thing. 50 cattle, 65 cattle. Let's say that I end up with 65 cattle by the end of the year, and I end up with 65 cattle by reinvesting my earnings. Let's say that I end up with 65 cattle. 65 cattle, if I have 65 cattle, those 65 cattle would be worth about $175,000, okay? And, I would have a positive equity, I would have made, over $100,000. And I would have netted myself over $100,000, okay? So I would be sitting there with a net positive equity position of $100,000, right? And also, this herd of animals will be producing me a check for about $14,000 a month. And within about 7 months, that $14,000 check, if I continue to push about 10 to 15 animals into the front end of the herd, 7 months down the line, when I start liquidating the 10 animals at a time or the 15 animals at a time, whatever it may be, it'll be about $25,000 to $35,000, right? The animals that I purchase always get put in at the front end of the herd. I do not slam animals into the back end of the cattle herd. That would be like, for me to put a bunch of money into the back end of the cattle herd, I would have to be buying a bunch of 5, 6, 7, 800 pound animals. And why would I do that? I purchase my animals small. I purchase them at 2, 3, 400 pounds. All right. And like these animals here, right? Like you see them right there, right? These animals, they are making me money, but I have not paid myself the money yet. But these animals are making me money, right? And so let's say that I have, within 3 months, I have, I made $35,000 a month, and I have a $100,000 net positive equity stake, and I'm also making myself $14,000 a month. And realistically, within 3 months after that, about 4 months after that, I would be making about, $25,000, $35,000 a month. And I've effectively set my business up so that I make a check every single month, right? This is one of the things that I've done for myself, was that I set everything ready so that I make money every single month, okay? And the check that is in my hand is always just the tip of the iceberg. A majority of my money is sitting in my cattle herd as an unrealized gain, or as the equity of the animal. The money that I put into purchasing the animal is substantially larger than the check that I have in my hand, and the unrealized gain of the herd is substantially larger than the amount of money that I put in. Okay? So, the the mass majority of my money is in pool number 2. And the reason pool number 2 is so large is because the money that I make on top of the money that I borrow from the bank is also my money. All right. And so, if I have, let's say I have $175,000, let's say I have $250,000, whatever, of cattle, okay, and I have, whatever. Let's say I have let's say I decide that, okay, I need to go and I need to take a loan for $100,000 because I make about $14,000 a month, and then here in about 3 or 4 months, that'll be about 35,000. And and even if I pulled all of that, and I promised myself that I would do my absolute best. I will commit myself to the absolute best of my capability, and I gave my promise to God that I will be a morally responsible person. Okay, I'm not going to go and YOLO the money. I'm not going to go and start doing drugs. I'm not going to start whatever drinking. I'm not going to I'm not going to YOLO the money or anything like that. I will do the most morally responsible thing, and I will and I made my promise to God about it. And I made a promise to myself that I will do my absolute best. I will split my chops open. I will do my absolute best to invest all of the money. So if I make $14,000, I will have to invest all of it, and then I will be looking to invest all of it and leveraging against it as well. When I make $40,000 a month, I will look to invest all of it and leverage against it as well. When I make $80,000, I will, whatever. I will, the check in my hand is only the tip of the iceberg, okay? It's the tip of the iceberg. A vast majority of my money is in pool number 2, and pool number 1 is my second largest source of money. The check in my hand is a negligible sum. It doesn't matter how, granted that my cattle herd is growing and I am still taking care of the animals, all right? Granted that is happening. The check in my hand is a negligible sum of money. It's the tip of the iceberg, okay? It's not any reasonable source of money. It's a very small amount of money. It doesn't matter how much is on that check. It could be 40,000, it could be 80,000, it could be 160,000. Granted that my animals are, still doing well, and I am keeping track of the business, and I am running the business efficiently, and just, following the business plan, leveraging against the assets, etc., etc. Pool number 2 is a drastically larger source of money, and pool number 1 is even a larger source of money than pool number 3. Pool number 2 is larger than pool number 1, and pool number 1 is larger than pool number 3. Pool number 3 is just the tip of the iceberg, okay? It's a very, very, very small amount of money compared to how much money I am actually making, all right? And I will be looking to leverage against pool number 2. And here's the thing. That would mean by January of next year, for me to leverage against my $175,000, let's say I have $175,000 equity. I have $175,000 worth of equity, and I make, let's say I'm net positive $100,000 in equity, okay? And I would be more than 100,000 net positive, but I'm just looking to keep the numbers, whatever, I would be more than 100,000, I would be, I may even make a little bit more than $100,000, okay? I may legitimately end up making a little bit more than 100, but 100,000. Let's just whatever, but but I would realistically, and then I would have to leverage against the 14,000 and invest it. So let's just say, it's whatever 140,000 or whatever 120,000. I'm not, it's something like plus or minus 7%, okay? Plus or minus 7%, 120, 140 grand. I would instantaneously, if I was going to dump $120,000 into my business to take my leverage up to 80%, I would go from having $175,000 worth of cattle to instantaneously having $300,000 worth of cattle, right? I would instantaneously go to having $300,000 worth of cattle, but 80% of the cattle would belong, not 80%. 60% of the cattle would belong to me, and 40% of the cattle would belong to the bank, right? I would have about $175,000 worth of my own money in the deal, and the bank would have about $125,000 worth of money in the deal, all right? And that $300,000 will now begin to produce me money. But this is also, that means that I have to slam money into the front end of the cattle herd. And for me to do that, I need preconditioning facilities. And that is also why I'm going to spend time buying up land next year. I'm going to start buying up a lot of land. I will start buying up a lot of land, okay? And, I will look into buying up a lot of land. And so, but here's the thing. When you think about it, the man with the $100 million making $10 million a year, I probably will not have any problems going to $2 million a year. I probably won't. I don't even see it as a difficult situation. All right, I will start buying up land. Even when I buy up land, I don't care that I spent money for the land, because the land will make me money. It will ultimately end up being a net positive for me, and all of the principal that I put into the land, I can pull that money back out by holding the land for collateral and getting myself a line of credit, and the interest that I pay is tax deductible. I don't care that I purchased land, okay? I will start buying up land, pretty substantial amounts of land, and I promised myself that I will do my absolute best. I will split my chops open if that's what it comes down to. I will do my absolute best to invest all of the capital. I'm not going to sit here and fiddle fart around with pulling money out of the business. I will do my absolute best to invest all of it. I will. All right. And I am looking to leverage against pool number 2, and leveraging against pool number 2. Realistically, if I had 65 cattle by the end of the year, within 3 months, if I had 65 cattle, those 65 cattle would honestly be worth about, with the current rate, they'd be worth about 140 grand. At an average weight of 500 pounds, 65 cattle would be worth about 120, 140 grand. And that 120, 140 grand would still be producing me about $14,000 a month for the next 4 months. And then after 4 months, I'd realistically be making somewhere between $25,000 and $35,000 a month. But that check in my hand is the tip of the iceberg. All right, if I have those 65 cattle and they're an average weight of 500 pounds, and I brought them in at 200, 225, I would realistically have to leverage against those animals. And if I leverage against, like 100 grand, I would instantaneously have to dump another 70 animals worth, some 70 animals worth of money into my business, and all of those animals would get slammed into the front end of the cattle herd. And the only way for me to do that is by preconditioning more animals at the same time. I will need a larger preconditioning facility, and that's also why I will be looking into buying up land. I will buy up land. And land, I don't consider land an expense, because land, at the end of the day, is pristine collateral. It makes me a positive return. If I legitimately need the principal sum back, I can always hold the land for collateral and take a loan against it. I can even do it for this land. All right, so I'm not concerned about it. And that's what I got going on, okay? And and the man that made $100 million and has a 10% return on it, I may legitimately end up going over 2 million. I don't even know, my net worth, I'll just say 30 million. My net worth may go over $30 million next year. That's a conservative estimate. I may legitimately have a net worth over, 30, I'm gonna say over 50. I'm just gonna say it, because I made the agreement with myself that I will do my absolute best. I will do my absolute best to invest everything and then some, okay? I will do my absolute best to invest everything, and I will be leveraging against my assets to purchase more cattle, and I will be looking into buying more land, all right? That's what, and I also made a promise to God that I'm not gonna be an immoral person about it. All right, I'm not going to go and sell my soul to the devil. I'm not going to go dancing with the devil about it. All right, it's going to be a lot of money.